Yes.
Still says practice.
Oh, now it says switch. Okay.
And I haven't seen anyone from the public come in yet, but I think you could go ahead and begin.
Great. Thank you. Welcome to the meat inspection task force meeting. I am the chair, Glenn Sacco. Before we begin, Stephen from the IT staff will explain how the public can participate in this hybrid meeting, which is accessible via video conference, telephone, or in person. Stephen.
Good morning, everyone. As an attendee, your microphone will be automatically muted during the meeting unless you're providing testimony. For each agenda item you wish to testify on, please click the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen. It should be in the middle. Board staff will individually enable each testifier to unmute their microphone. When recognized by the chair, please unmute your microphone before speaking and mute your microphone after you finish speaking in order to prevent audio feedback. When testifying, you'll be asked to identify yourself and the organization, if any, that you represent. For each testifier, you'll be limited to 2 minutes of testimony per agenda item. If anyone is joining by phone, when the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering star and then 9 on your phone's keypad. After entering star and then 9, a voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the chairperson, you may unmute yourself by pressing star and then 6 on your phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. Once you are finished speaking, please enter star and then 6 again to mute yourself. And in the event that connectivity is lost and attempts to repair the connection exceed 30 minutes, the meeting may be terminated or continued to another date and time. Please consult our webpage for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I would like to call this meeting to order. It is 9:03 a.m. I will now take the roll call of the task force present. When your name is called, please indicate your presence with a here or present and state who, if anyone over the age of 18, is present in the room with you. This also serves as a roll call vote. For each subsequent vote, I will ask if there are any objections or recusals. If there are none, then the motion will be approved on the same basis as this initial roll call. Let's see.
Chair,
Yes.
Chair, just to interrupt, if the board members could please remember that camera should be on for the hybrid meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. Okay, I'm here. Rogerine Kali Archie, Director, County of Maui, Department of Agriculture. Absent. Michael Burke, Program Manager, Food and Drug Branch.
Present.
Jason Misaki, Program Manager, Department of Land and Natural Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife.
President, that's Division of Forestry and Wildlife.
Sorry, thank you. Teresa Thompson, Director, Maui Farm Bureau, sorry. Teresa.
Present.
Thank you. William Jacinto, Past President, Maui Cattlemen's Association. Present.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Isaac Maeda, Administrator, Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity, Animal Industry Division.
Here.
Thank you. Jackie Keefe.
Present.
Thank you. Daryl Kaneshiro.
Here.
Thank you. Hunter Hevlin, Food Systems Planner.
President, and nobody else in the room.
Thank you. Okay, so we have quorum. Okay. Moving on to our items. Item A. Request for approval of the past meat task force action entering into a memorandum of agreement with the University of Hawaii to conduct a study and report to expand the meat processing capacity in the state to allow for meat and access deer and other wild game to be processed for distribution. May I have a motion to approve the request?
I move
I'm sorry, who was that? I'm sorry, I didn't miss-
Mike,
Oh,
DOH.
Mike. Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Maeda. Okay. Is there any presentation by staff? Does anyone from the public wish to give testimony?
There are no hands raised from the public at this time.
Thank you. Is there any discussion by the task force regarding this MOA?
Glenn, you wanna
Yes.
go over like, I think everybody has seen the MOA, but do we need to go over responsibilities of the MOA in general or summarize it?
Okay, let me see here. So I see, okay, I can do that. Or Isaac, do you want to present that?
Yeah, I can do that real fast.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, responsibilities, this memorandum of agreement was to be able to have the study done with the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And the requirement for C.F.R was basically to conduct research to develop a practical plan to expand the meat processing capacity in the state to allow for meat from access deer and other wild game to be processed for distribution by nonprofits. And the meat processing project objectives, were attached, and the draft report is what everybody has it was distributed to everybody in the task force. And each DOA's responsibilities were for payment of amount not to exceed $45,000 to conduct the research and complete a report. And the task force members were basically able to, or HDOA made task force members accessible to UHCTAR so that they could conduct the research and to ask any questions. But that's the gist of the MOA. But
Thank you, Isaac. Is there any discussion by the task force? If there are none, I'm going to call for the vote. And I'm going to go down this the roll call. Michael Burke.
aye.
Okay. Jason Misaki.
Aye.
Teresa Thompson.
Aye.
William Jacinto.
Aye.
Dr. Maeda.
Aye.
Jackie Keefe. Sorry. She's still on. I'm sorry. Is Jackie
Oh,
Keefe?
sorry, were you not able to hear me? I said aye.
Oh,
I just
I'm
my
sorry.
my bandwidth at home is terrible.
Okay.
I apologize.
All right. Thank you. So Jackie Keefe votes aye. Daryl Kaneshiro.
Aye.
Thank you. Hunter Hevlin.
My apologies. The connection on my end dropped, and I missed what the question was.
Oh, I was calling for a vote on the memorandum of agreement between the University of Hawaii and the Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity.
Just ratifying its existence. Aye.
Okay, thank you. And Chair's votes aye. Okay, so it's unanimous. That's it. So it's so the motion is approved. Okay. And so I'm gonna move on to item B, discussion on the report from the University of Hawaii for Act 54, SLH 2023, the Meat Processing Task Force to create and implement a master plan to expand meat processing capacity to allow axis deer and other wild game to be processed. This was sent out as part of the email, and there is a report by Dr. Caleb Reichard and Abigail Anna, who is here. Thank you. Yes.
So we also sent out the finalized one yesterday to Dr. Maida and Gwen as well, and I'm more than happy to email out that final one to everyone here if they have not received it.
I think, well, yeah, we haven't had a chance to go in depth on that report yet, but yes, it will become available when we're done with that. Otherwise, is there do you want to do a short presentation on your findings?
Yeah, so we prepared the final report yesterday. It ended up being 40 some pages. So there's a lot of stuff to go through. We also had them send out the presentation of the final results, the final PowerPoint for you to look through. And then Abigail Anna, she's one of my students. She's kind of been the lead student on this project, so that has been extremely helpful. But she also prepared a summary of what we found in the survey. And so if she wants to share that, then that can maybe lead some of the discussion. We also, in the final report, based off of what we found in the survey, do have some possible suggestions that might be the most straightforward option that I'm more than happy to share that we found going through and analyzing the survey. But if everyone's okay with it, we could have Abigail share essentially the condensed findings of what this study has found.
Sure. Thank you.
Hi, can everyone see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Oh, sorry. Hi everyone, my name is Abigail Anna. I'm a senior with the Department of Human Nutrition, Food and Animal Sciences at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm very grateful to be presenting the results of the survey for the State of Hawaii Game Meat Processing Plan. Dr. Reichart was the PI on the project, but I helped him with it. I'll go over a quick introduction, as well as some of the methods, so our survey organization and our data collection, as well as how we analyzed our data. The results will not be included in this presentation. They were included in the longer presentation that was attached to the meeting minutes, but if you have any questions, we can definitely answer those. I'll go over a quick discussion and then a conclusion of the results that we found. So for a quick introduction, as I'm sure you all know, the state of Hawaii has a reported food insecurity rate of about 22%, with its highest being in Hawaii County. Our distributors work very hard to share up to 17.7 million meals in the 2024 fiscal year. However, the consumer price index for food has increased by 4.2% from 2024 to 2025, indicating that food insecurity is more likely than not to increase in the upcoming years. The state of Hawaii has thus, under Act 54, recognized the need to expand protein capacity to feed local under-resourced populations. The task force is looking at game meat protein as a way to address these protein needs. There are currently 7 legal to hunt game mammal species as outlined by the DLNR. That is mouflon sheep, feral hybrid sheep, feral pigs, black-tailed deer, axis deer, and feral goats. Current population sizes are unknown as eradication efforts are currently undergoing. However, the Sweet Center in 2024 estimated a total of 12 axis deer per square mile. So that's about 10,000 animals in Maui County alone for axis deer. Overall, there is a heavy overpopulation of game mammals that cause damage to private agricultural lands, degradation of ecosystems, and our reduced native species diversity. Sorry. There have been other states that have implemented a game meat processing plan. Utah implemented House Bill 142 that required a licensed hunter to drop off wild game as long as that animal was in apparent good health and it was labeled as not for sale or donated wild game meat. Other states, such as Michigan, utilized the Hunters Feeding Michigan program that allowed hunters to drop off whole animal game to specific processors as long as they reported harvest details and the animal was in good health. This program also sent lymph nodes to their disease lab to make sure that the animal was of good health. So Section 145D2 revised some statuses to allow for these amendments. First of all, there were changes or updates to the definition of donor. They added butchers and meat processors to include them in their ability to donate. So anyone or any organization that donates food, as long as they follow food safety regulations. They also made exceptions to liability, allowing donation of livestock or wild game if harvested and processed safely and believed fit for consumption. So the objective of this survey was to assess the feasibility of these game meat donation programs in Hawaii by gathering community feedback on current practices and identifying support that hunters, distributors, or processors would need to provide wild meat to under-resourced communities. So for our survey, the survey was hosted on the Qualitrix software. There was a total of 75 questions, including multiple choice and open-ended items. Some questions allowed respondents to specify, so they were able to select yes, no, or maybe, and specify why they selected maybe or why they selected no. Other questions allowed respondents to select all that apply. The distribution of these questions, we had about 6 for general and demographic, 16 for food distributors, 35 for hunters, and 18 for slaughterhouses and butchers. This survey was open for 9 weeks. It was open from May 5th, 2025 to July 7th. Responses were kept anonymous to ensure privacy and confidentiality, and we downloaded data every week to allow continuous monitoring and organized data reporting. We had 2 types of data, both subjective data and objective data. For the human speech data that we had, so when people were allowed to answer open-ended questions and they were able to speak, we utilized thematic analysis and multiple rounds of coding. It was essentially finding the main idea of those responses, relating it to a code, and then another person went through and validated the code. Each of these codes were then consolidated into a theme. We reported the frequency that each theme arose for the specific question responses. But we did allow more than one theme per response. So the total number of themes might not always equate to the total number of responses for that specific question. For our objective data, it was reported as relative frequency. So dividing the number of responses for each option by the total number of responses. So I'll go over a brief discussion of our general and demographic results. Our respondents were mostly male, and it was we had a racially diverse respondent pool. A majority of our respondents were hunters at about 77%. Our food distributors and slaughterhouses and butchers were less represented at 12 and 9% respectively. Most respondents, however, did support the state contracting experienced wild game processors. However, there was some conditional support for these awarded contracts that depended on processing capacity, a request that local companies be awarded, as well as a request for disclosure of game origin to food distributors or the community. A main source of support that was requested was an increase in processing capacity at 22%. For our food distributors, a large portion of them were interested in participating. Our distributors indicated a wide distribution access statewide. However, the capacity for each organization ranged from about 100 to 500,000 pounds, which indicates that not all distributors will be able to accommodate large amounts of protein donation. We also asked about previous protein donation trends. We found that it has been inconsistent in the past. Only 62% of organizations have distributed sources in the past, and only 16% of those who have distributed were on regular donation schedules. Quite a few people distributed protein in emergency situations or as they received it. Some of the main challenges of our food distributors were cold storage and transportation. The support they requested to address this was an increase in facility capacity for storage and distribution. However, most distributors were reluctant to accept non-USDA inspected protein, and their knowledge of regulations affecting donation and distribution is varied, and they requested clear guidance and oversight. For our hunters, there was a general support for the program at about 75%. Hunting occurred across all islands, but primarily on state or private land. For those that hunted on private land, they were primarily given permission through landowners, either verbally or in writing. We asked about the differences in group hunting versus individual hunting. Hunting in groups occurred less frequently, however, they harvested more animals per hunt. And then alternatively, individuals hunted more frequently but harvested less animals per hunt. Most dressing was done in the field as indicated by hunters, and on islands permitted to harvest axis deer, so Maui, Molokai Maui, and Lanai, it was the primary species hunted. A majority of our hunters were either familiar or partially familiar with food safe handling practices. We also saw a strong willingness to utilize a mobile reporting tool, such as an app, for harvest details and movement of animals to processors post-mortem. Hunters also requested an increase in USDA inspector availability as ways that the state can support them. For our butchers, our responses indicated that the survey primarily reached facilities. It reached facilities statewide, but primarily we saw that they were located on Maui. A majority of our respondents were slaughterhouses, with an even distribution between mobile and permanent facilities. The capacity responses from our butchers and slaughterhouses were limited and they varied. However, none of our facilities are currently able to process wild game or willing to process wild game. There is also a limited willingness to accept game species, as well as strict time limits about when they could accept carcasses post-mortem. A majority of facilities were unable to be extended due to limited capacity, and all of our responding facilities were unaware of local or state regulations regarding donation. Their main challenge was cross-species contamination, but they did all indicate that fiscal incentives would encourage their participation in this program. In conclusion, there is overall support, especially from hunters, but participation will depend on processing capacity and clear guidance and rules from the state. Our processing capacity and storage limits are the major barrier for all of our groups. And regulatory awareness is limited, and our communities in all categories request clear guidance, and they wanted liability protection. Our distribution networks can reach communities, but their storage capacity is limited, and donations have been inconsistent in the past. So there isn't a current regulation for or current guideline for frequent protein donation. Hunters, however, were very willing to participate, especially in mobile reporting tools, but they do request better land access and inspector availability. A majority of our respondents did support the state in awarding contracts to experienced processors. So that's it for our quick presentation. If you have any questions, I think we can answer those now, or if you would like to email us, these are our emails as well.
Sorry, I see Jackie Keefe's hand is raised. Yeah.
Yeah, mahalo. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. A question that I had for you was, how did people find this survey? How was it?
Yeah, so this survey, it was distributed. So for our processing and our food banks, we went into essentially no one, like we can pull up USDA processors and food banks, and it was emailed directly to them. We also worked with several organizations that we know have direct contact with hunters, as well as processors, and distribute it that way, as well as collaborating with our natural resource management program which has listservs for hunters. Additionally, to contact people who participate in hunting organizations and hunting groups, we emailed those hunting organizations and hunting groups and asked them to share it with their hunters as well. So we tried to cover all of our bases with listservs, and it did go out into a couple of those newsletters regularly as well. So we tried to get the widest possible, but there is always going to be limitations with surveys like this. Did that answer your question, Jackie?
Yeah, I just I know of someone who has a nonprofit called Maui Wild Game Management, and he did not receive it, so I just was curious. That's why I asked the question.
I do know that it was emailed to his email that was provided online. That was one that so, yeah. Hunter, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I had a question. There was mention of the percent of respondents that were distributors or slaughterhouses as a ratio of total respondents. And I'm wondering if you have any data on that as a ratio of total slaughterhouses.
Yeah,
Like
so
how much of the industry was covered, particularly for commercial slaughter? And then my second question was just on the word distributors is used a lot, and it seems like it's meaning food processors, food banks, and just if you could break that down a little.
yeah, so I'll answer the first one. We did email it to all known USDA processors that we could find contacts for online. To keep it anonymous, we couldn't say like so and so filled out the survey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, understood.
We did have lower turnout, and with the food distributors who took it, a lot of them were unwilling to indicate their exact location. So they didn't have to answer all the questions, because one way we did it was we asked which islands or counties are you currently serving? And we did have a lot of our food distributors leave that question, not food, our slaughterhouses and butchers leave that question blank, if that makes sense. Abby, do you know the specific ratio of what we were seeing for that percentage?
I don't now. I could definitely get back to you with that.
And then regarding the food distributors, so we worked with on proper language. So one of our faculty members at UH typically deals with one of their primary areas is under-resourced communities. And for proper terminology, so this is for food banks and things like that. So people who distribute food to under-resourced communities, they said for proper terminology for the survey, we should consider them food distributors. And so that's why we use that term.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the meaning of food distributors in this case is solely entities working in non-commercial distribution.
Yes. So that was the goal for it. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And they could write in what communities they served primarily.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So no commercial distributors were surveyed.
There were some, we believe, that filled out other parts of the survey, but this was geared towards the food bank for serving under-resourced communities.
Okay. If helpful, I did a survey of all in the food bank. I work with the food banks a fair bit, and the language that's usually that I've experienced in that industry at least is there's the food banks, and then they refer to their what would commonly be known as kind of soup kitchens and pantries and so forth, or as their partner agencies. I did do a statewide survey of partner agencies a few years ago in concert with the food banks, and the cold storage was a primary bottleneck that was identified that a number of projects prior and subsequent are trying to address. So thanks for the clarification. I'd be interested to see if it's possible to cleave the commercial distributors who seem like they may have very different needs, particularly mixed and donations being integrated. Might muddle things a little. So
we did see that one of the biggest issues was cold storage, and that was one of their biggest requests moving forward was additional cold storage facility. Yeah.
Well, if valuable, and I can get the go ahead from the food banks, I have enumerated their cold storage wishes.
Perfect. That's great
Yeah.
to yeah. William, I think I saw your hand. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I just kind of saw a bottleneck with the processing because the lack of, amount of people, and seems like they're reluctant, probably for good reason, just because you really don't know what to expect, the condition of the meat coming in. And I was wondering if Dr. Bell was involved in any of these questions and giving his feedback as to, some of the requirements or things like that.
Dr. Bell. Would you remind me of Dr. Bell's first name? Sorry.
Josh Bell.
I don't believe he was involved in this. We did have several different groups go through our questions as well as to help make sure that they were geared for the right way, but I'm not recognizing the name Josh Bell on that one.
Yeah, he's the USDA, kind of the head inspector for all of the inspectors.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah. So I was put in contact with him, but sorry, I remember this one. I remember this one now. There were some logistical challenges at that time with the USDA that they weren't sure exactly how much they could participate or guide these questions at that time. Yeah, sorry. But we did try to work with as many people to make sure that our questions were geared correctly.
Yeah, no, yeah, that is all good. I understand. It's just that I think the final approval of a lot of stuff would go through them or not.
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to circle back and see what the regs are, just so that I don't know how the thing works, you know what I mean? But I know there's always questions like that. And I think that's part of the reason why the processors are reluctant and they kind of want some kind of liability too. Because it's kind of spooky when you bring in outside game. You got clean hunters and you got some real sloppy, messy guys. And, yeah, they're trying to do the best they can, but they just, maybe bad situation, dirty area at the time, stuff like that. But
That was something
this,
that did arise was how do we determine essentially and implement a standard for field dressing that would be acceptable, and how do we distinguish between what was
yeah,
a clean dressed carcass versus not a clean dressed carcass?
yeah, because even like bullet holes, you kind of want some kind of margin maybe away from the hole, so, the bruising meat and stuff.
Yeah, and kind of with bullets. So what we've seen other places do. So Michigan and Minnesota, I think Michigan, right, Abby? They require all carcasses to actually that participate in these programs to be ultrasounded to ensure, or go through a metal detector to ensure there's not bullets essentially in the carcass as well.
Yeah, because sometimes they come in with maybe not necessarily your bullet, like from an injured shot or something. I mean, things happen, but coming in this with an open mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, William, for that. May I ask Abby if she can end the screen sharing? Yeah,
Jackie,
thank you.
is your hand still raised, new raise or original raise? Sorry.
Okay, it's a new raise whenever.
Okay. Yep.
So one of my questions is specifically about the estimate for 10,000. Because when I searched that source, because I was like, that's wildly lower than I've heard. So I looked into the source, and when you look up Svet Center, that brings me to the ASU study, which is like something that I've been sharing a lot. But the ASU study estimates between 145,000 and 167,000 in Maui Nui, not 10,000. So that was a pretty substantial concern for me. So I was kind of just wondering if you have any idea where that number specifically came from, because that feels like a pretty big oversight.
It's a drastic, yeah. Big. Abby, did you? Sorry.
All right. Yes, give me 1 second. I can pull up where I got it from. That might have been that was definitely me. So is it all right if I just take one moment to look it up?
Of course, of
Oh,
course. I actually had another comment anyway while you do that, which was so liability protections, you said came up a lot, right? Utah's bill that you mentioned, as well as the Michigan Hunters, those were two things that were brought forward to Senator Hashimoto in the meeting where we requested the drafting of what ended up being SB 1230, which is the part that died, the counterpart to HB 1334. And in the report, it says that current, I think it says current law, yeah, existing state law HB 1334, but it did not pass. It is stuck in its last committee. So that is for liability protections. So that is a pretty big thing for me.
Yeah, so liability protection came up a lot. So what we went through the survey data quite a bit, and we did come up with what we felt like would be one of the more straightforward ways for a program like this to go through. I can share that if people are interested, or I don't know how much I'm I guess
Yeah.
that's probably a Kelsey question.
Yeah, I more was just wondering, like, because there was an assumption made in the report that it is existing state law, but it's not. And so for me, that
Okay.
changes the way the report reads.
Okay.
Is that the September report?
I also flagged that as like it's referring to it as existing law versus a bill that was under proposal. It's page.
So is that in the September one or?
Yeah, I think it's on page 1 of the September report. It's like the
Yeah, we
last
haven't.
paragraph on that first page.
Bottom, that's the bottom.
Yeah.
It refers to HB 1334
Yeah.
as
Okay.
state law.
Existing.
Oh, okay. So it's still under, you said it's still going through. Okay. And
Yes,
that's
so it
It's
is.
it's essentially dead, I think is probably
It's
more.
it's actually not. So there's been a couple things incoming for this session, and one of the directives has been like not to let things die that didn't make it all the way through. I know, really good news. And so right now it still has its last committee. So the last committee, I believe, for whatever reason, Judiciary and CPN. So Judiciary is the lead. Senator McKelvey did speak with Senator Rhodes about making sure that this bill gets a hearing. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not dead. So just this is something that I think the task force should be advocating for.
Thank you. That we will update that for the December one to clarify that. So thank you.
Caleb, I'm gonna just take a pause here. I just wanted to indicate that Rogerine Kali Archie, Director of County of Maui Department of Agriculture, has joined us. Thank you for joining us, Kali. And Jackie, you mentioned earlier that you had testimony from someone. Was
Yeah, I
that
sent you
for-
guys an email. He got stuck in traffic and wasn't able to send it, and it would have been late today anyway, but it was from
Okay.
that wild game management guy that I was talking about.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Caleb, is there any other questions for Dr. Reichard or Abigail regarding the September report?
right. Just to answer Miss Keith's
Okay.
question about the 10,000 deer.
Mhm.
I was looking, I can send you the source that I got it from. It was the Axis Deer Impacts Maui County ASU from 2024. It looks like they were using unpublished aerial surveys by Guider that estimated a range of at least 10,000 deer. I can share that with you if that helps, and update that. I think the range might have been different because when I did go onto ASU's website, I saw an updated one. So the one that we were looking at was just a little bit out of date, and I think the update was done directly on the website. And so I can change I can change it and I can send you the one that we found, if that's okay.
Abby, sometimes those surveys are in specific areas, and you know what I mean, and not the whole island. So
Okay.
you might want to check, because I've seen all kinds, but just to see, it may be a specific area from like Omopio to, I don't know, somewhere, you know what I mean?
Gotcha. I'll make the updates and I can share that with Dr. Riker.
Thank
No,
you.
they've been hunting a lot, so the numbers have come down, but I cannot tell you how much offhand. I'm looking for one of the surveys that I had. Oh,
Um, okay, I just wanted to reach out to Kelsey. Just wanted to clarify if materials emailed to the members of this task force, um, should it be, I just wanted to make sure we don't violate any sunshine law provisions. Can you have any guidance for us on regarding just to make sure we don't discuss it or?
So yeah, no discussion should be held right under the chapter 92. I can advise further in terms of if people are interested in having those kinds of meeting side and not side meetings because those are not allowed, especially decision making is not allowed.
Sure.
Regarding materials, whatever the board packet the task force received, it should be posted. The it's Miss Anna's report, if she does share with the board, should also be posted as well, just for Sunshine.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Okay. Are
And I
there any
have
other
asked him to email it directly to that email as well.
Okay.
Chair, it's up. I know this is not an action item, but it's up to you if you want to receive public testimony, if any,
Oh.
including I guess the individual that was named earlier.
So that was, I believe that was the email that was sent out by Jackie Keefe. That's correct. Does that have to be presented here at this meeting?
If it's written, it can be posted. If all the board members have received it. But if other individuals who may be watching or present in person, then they should have can have the opportunity to provide testimony as well.
I got a question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Starting to get the idea that this is a real serious task force that we're on with sunshine laws and stuff. So can somebody explain what our like duty is, or just briefly what we're challenged with or tasked with?
Stand by.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Only get in trouble.
Oh, wait, let me first of all, let me just address the question regarding that public testimony with Kelsey. I just want to make sure. So this testimony was submitted by Jackie Keefe on the request of her colleague, and I don't know if everybody is on this email. Let me see.
Yeah, I replied all to the only one that had other people on it, so I don't know who was on it.
The testimony can be read if you want, Chair, or it can be sent to all members present today and posted after the meeting has concluded, along with the recording and other things.
Okay.
But we should also receive, I guess the task force should know who is submitting the testimony, not because I understand Miss Keefe did not submit testimony. It was on behalf of another individual.
Yeah, and his information is all on it. It's a file.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, what we'll do, okay, so we'll receive it and make sure that everybody does get it, because I think we might have a couple people off the email, and then have it posted, I guess. Yeah. All right, thank you. Okay, so getting back to Williams Jacinto's question. So yeah, this task force is subject to the state of Hawaii rules and regulations, including the Sunshine Law. And so we are meeting here today based on this Act 54 relating to the meat donation, which is enacted by the state of Hawaii's legislature back in 2023, I believe. And so we were tasked with several things, and that was to basically implement a plan to expand the state's meat processing capacity to allow meat from axis deer and other wild game to be processed for distribution by nonprofit food distribution services to feed local under-resourced communities, including the homeless. And we were given several tasks which had to deal with food safe handling procedures, determining the slaughter facility's capacity to process wild game protein by county, determining, food distribution organizations that may be willing to participate in this program, and legislative actions needed to support a wild game protein distribution program. There are some deliverables, which I won't go into. There's a list of it, but this would be found under it was part of the attachments that was sent out, and is the project title State of Hawaii Game Meat Processing Plan, which you can review later so that to answer any questions, and you can, I guess, ask me if you have any concerns. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Hunter.
Yeah, I'd be curious if there was any sense from the processors that responded and butchers, just a sense of the scales of operation in response to, oh gosh, what was it? SB 827 and HB 452 that were moving through last year. I'd done some outreach to small game processors that generally run kind of hunting not tour services, but kind of guided hunts, particularly with an interest to, instead of trying to expand the scope of current processors to include new types of game that are generally under a completely different governance, exploring how the state in particular, maybe counties, could support the expansion of some of these guys who are kind of at the margin of the marketplace. And so curious, from the processors in particular that were contacted, how many of them were maybe doing some of this on the side versus, we run a slaughterhouse.
Okay, I don't know if that was part of that survey, Caleb.
Yeah, so we didn't include like specific ones like that in that. But when we asked about specific laws or regulations that they were working with, we actually found that I believe the slaughterhouses, they didn't list any compared to our other groups. So our hunters typically, they had a list of ones that they were working with. Our food distributors, our food banks, they had a list that they provided. The groups who filled out under the slaughterhouse and butcher did not provide um any input there, which kind of
You're saying any input on?
like because we asked for like a list of like what was how did we word a list of
We
like
asked if
laws or regulations they were working with or aware of that could impact this
Yeah.
program like this, and they did not list.
Was part of the contract, sorry, I haven't committed the whole thing to memory, part of the bill or the contract to review those existing laws?
It was to provide a list of the ones. So
Okay.
we
And
did,
was that list only generated based off of what those folks provided or
no,
no?
we also
Okay.
went, yeah.
Yeah, because I guess in my experience as a hunter, in other, particularly in other states, or that generally post hunt, there's a processor that specifically focuses on wild game as opposed to you're taking it to a regular kind of slaughterhouse that also does this in addition. So I'm thinking from a strategic standpoint, if maybe for the purposes of our task force to look at what might work going forward in our islands, I view this as an opportunity to expand rural economic development through targeted subsidy to get some of these programs going versus trying to task existing processors with a whole different cascade of regulatory oversight, as well as hoping that they'll participate non-commercially in donations and so forth in a way that I think might not work all that well with their business logics.
So, Hunter, you're thinking like perhaps something like a mobile slaughter unit dedicated to the processing of feral protein?
I don't know that it needs to be mobile. So at least with one folks I was talking to on Molokai about it, take somebody on a hunt, you can do the processing. It's not for sale, it's not for resale. They're usually branded that way. It could be mobile, but I think in most cases, I mean, mobile could be fine. But I think exploring what it would look like to have at least the opportunity for a few folks to expand maybe their existing guided hunt operations that probably have some post-harvest processing already to provide that service for others who may not already be may not be using their guide services. That to me is what I've seen work in other jurisdictions, and also I think spreads out who benefits from state subsidy and maybe this kind of interest, while not confusing the logics of, does the processor really care what you do with it? Not really. As long as we make sure they're doing it right, you can donate it, you take it home. That's not really part of their focus. And because of the significant, at least from my understanding from FMIA, FSIS, the significant differences in requirements for processing for what is it, exempted species? That's not the right terminology, but for essentially for wild game versus not, having different setups, I think is likely to be the easiest.
Okay, thank you for that. Raquel Wong, you have a question?
Yeah, this is Mike, Department of Health. Kind of to piggyback on what Hunter just said. Here on Oahu, we've heard that, the slaughterhouse that processes cattle does not want to mix with pork. Because even just between two regulated FSIS livestock, the differences are such that it's a challenge. And so I think that, what Hunter is saying makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure how open the an existing slaughterhouse would be if they're already doing FSIS processing to also want to bring in additional species that require a whole different level of oversight and processing. And so I think that, the idea of maybe looking not necessarily at the existing slaughterhouses and seeing if they're willing to, nuke their whole facility and, sanitize everything in order to bring in access deer, and then they have to do it all over again once, pork comes in. It might make more sense to have dedicated wild game facilities, in the respective counties.
And that was something that I believe the hunters brought up in one of their needs as well. Correct, Abby? Is just more specific places that they could bring him to process rather than necessarily one of those facilities.
Okay. Jackie has a question again, and then William.
I had a follow-up.
Oh, wait, William, we'll have Jackie's question first.
Yeah, I just I really appreciate those points. I think that's absolutely the move, especially for the rural counties, to make sure that we're prioritizing that diversification. But also, I think it's important to point out that there is a lot of confusion right now so DOH has stricter standards than they legally have to have to protect themselves, and that has fallen on to like the liability with hunters. And so just to acknowledge the fact that the USDA representatives have confirmed that USDA representation for or inspection for donated meat for axis deer is not necessary. So that's a really important point that a lot of people don't realize, and so I wanted to make sure to bring that up.
So axis deer, yeah, can be processed in a food safe kitchen.
Okay, thank you. William, you have a question?
Yeah, well, kind of follow up. It's along the line with the larger slaughterhouses. To bring in, different species and stuff, they kind of got to write it all into the HACCP plan. And a lot of times that not going to pass even, it's going to be very, very hard. So I think expecting them to put in, be accepting animals, we already might just call that off and focus on separate places and smaller ones and then I think Department of Health and USDA and with Jackie, we gotta talk story and figure out what is a workable plan. Like, you know what I mean? What is acceptable?
Yeah, I definitely have some items that I'll share with everyone to be published and however but it's a conversations that have been happening that I've only been pulled into a little over a year ago, but they've been happening since like pre-2017, specifically with DOH and with USDA. And so just like really trying to nail down the confirmation of like who agrees on what. And DOH has basically said like, no, we're going to go with this more restrictive proposal that you gave us until there's legislation be like to protect ourselves, basically.
Yeah, I think we gotta like understand what each department kind of has to deal with themselves, yeah, and be mindful of each other.
Something that did come up in this is once we get the actual protein, so hunter, processor, all that, it does have to go to our food banks, food distributors, and we are going to run into a bottleneck there, like what Hunter said, with they don't have cold storage space to get necessarily continuous donations of protein. So part of also coming up with this, we do have to address essential cold storage space with that. So whether there is a bill written for a grant program that food banks can apply to for cold storage and like refrigerated trucks or something like that. But that is going to be one of the largest bottlenecks once we actually get a protein. We have to be able to distribute it. Hunter?
Yeah, towards that end, the Hawaii Food Bank, I know, had received funding and was supporting a number of their partner agencies to increase their refrigeration capacity. And that's the same bottleneck that's faced for supporting increases in local food in general, not just meats being integrated into the social safety nets provided by food banks.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other discussion?
I would just to piggyback a bit on Jackie and I happen to have been talking about this before I was part of this task force. And from my read, the HB 1334 from last year and the current Hawaii Meat Inspection Act mirror a lot of the Federal Meat Inspection Act, with the exception of it not explicitly exempting wild game. And so it seems like there are a couple of shifts, and I haven't been party to them, but I believe Jackie and others had been in some discussion with Department of Health to try and understand. Mike, if you've got takes, please let us know about what the specific requirements would be to have DOH say this can move forward. Some other things that, at least in my review, that may come up is the way that HB 1334 is written. It's likely that mixing wouldn't be allowed. And it's pretty common if you're distributing, if, at least I'll say for myself, if I'm making ground venison, it's pretty lean. So it's common to mix in pork fats, for example. And so I think some of those nitty gritties might be worth exploring, and the extent to which the proposed law or the existing law may need to be amended to reflect what regularly happens on the ground, or include something about outreach to ensure that if that mixing is going to trigger a whole slew of other federal oversight, which it may, that's clearly stated through any program that's trying to move forward.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, Hunter. As a non-hunter, that's I can understand that. I will say the conversations with DOH, they have been pretty explicit that they won't allow non-inspection of mix.
And to kind of jump in, Hunter, as you know, I've been on the job here for just a couple of years now. We're joined today also by the division chief, who's also been on the job for a couple of years. What I'm trying to say is that there's a change, at least in the Environmental Health Services Division at DOH. We're looking at not just what is or isn't safe, although that is our core mission. But how are we a better partner, especially when it comes to things like sustainability, access to food, even branding, right? And Hawaii made and the premium that it should entail. And so I think that, certainly, Jackie, perhaps after the task force disbands, we'd be more than happy to sit down and have conversations and maybe reopen some of those conversations. Again, like I said, our mission is to protect the public health. And so we're going to have to look at it through that lens. And that can't change. But I think that there are ways that we can, try to find a better middle ground than maybe your experiences in the past with DOH.
Michael, I'm going to ask if you can identify or have the division chief identify himself.
Hi, good afternoon, Matt Carano. As Mike pointed out, I'm the acting administrator. I am the administrator for the Environmental Health Services Division at the Department of Health. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see here.
So one theme that kind of came out of this survey that I don't know, that we felt like would be one of the most straightforward paths that we could see. It was initially brought up in developing this is, as Jackie said, there are several companies or businesses that already are familiar with hunting wild game for food distribution, whether it's for profit or other services. And so initially we asked kind of if the state would support in this survey awarding a contract to a competitive contract to a company to essentially what their job would be to work as one of these companies hunting wild game, bringing a USDA inspector and delivering it to our food distributors across the state. People who weren't for that, their main concern was they wanted to make sure it went to a local company. So as long as it went to a local company, it seemed like it'd have quite a bit of support. So part of what this would do is it would bring in companies already familiar with processing wild game under USDA inspection. And then with those contracts, it would allow those companies, if it was a local company, to continue to expand to deal with wild game and keep it food safe to distribute it out. Part of the reason why this seemed like one of the more straightforward options is the majority of food banks did say they did not want to accept non-USDA marked protein sources. So that did seem like one of the more straightforward is if we could avoid that. Did I phrase that correctly, Abby? Yeah, and then but I saw Jackie and Hunter both raise their hands as I was going through this. So I think I'm not sure who went first.
I'd actually like to defer to Hunter to go first, just because I know he's involved with the food banks. I'd like to hear his mana'o before I.
Yeah, I'll say from we happened to be standing in a lobby together at poll a couple weeks ago. It didn't seem like many of the heads were active, food bank leadership were actively integrating meats, but that's very different than the regulatory side of it. I wonder if there's maybe a value for the state at this point in if the interest is so high on the part of entities outside of the food banks and having these goods, this type of protein be made available, but they're stringently requiring something that I believe many food entities nationally don't require, because there are numerous meat donation programs, in some cases directly from hunters nationally. I wonder if that might be something worth looking at or making a little bit more explicit. I think just like the Department of Health, they want to make sure everybody's healthy and safe. But I would think if you ask them whether they would rather you fund a program to have hunters go out and do hunting and then do meat processing and then give it to them versus any other means of their volume of activities that are currently unfunded by the state, I don't know that this would be the top priority. Again, I can't speak for them, but it's just from a resource distribution, something to consider.
One thing like you brought up is they did say they were very inconsistent in protein donations. So that was another way we were looking at essentially getting a consistent supply, because it was initially suggested having hunting groups go out and do hunts for programs like this. And what we found hunting groups weren't as consistent as individual hunters. And so we felt like that would add in essentially that inconsistency to the food bank on, oh, are we getting meat dropped off today or do we have like a regularly scheduled one? I'm not sure if I phrased that correctly, a regularly scheduled like drop off.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting notion. I knowing that consistently state resources there's always a reason we can't feed kids this year at the legislature. And it would seem curious that to me, as a hunter, that there would be a whole fleet of people who are willing to do this, who already do this, who are willing to do it for free. But the only means that we can imagine to go forward with it is by subsidizing the costs of going out and doing what most people choose to do as a part of recreation. And if the real bottleneck to it is that the USDA stamp is critical with the food banks, and then exploring why that is, I think would be worth doing. And that's something I can do with some of them maybe this week. So yeah. And thanks. And thanks for you pre-addressed a few of my other questions in what you were sharing. So thank you.
Jackie.
Yeah, I would say to that point, the agreed, kakao. But also, one of the biggest concerns that I've come across is there tends to be a pivot to a conversation about like, okay, these are the people already doing it. And I think we need to make sure that we are not like only subsidizing companies that are already doing this work. As Hunter said, like we should be using this as an expansion and not just like, okay, these people are doing it, so let's give them funding, because that's kind of how it's been. And we need to make sure that we are thinking more holistically and future forward.
Is there anybody else who wants to add to the discussion? Okay, then. If there's none, just double checking. Okay, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to meet today. Obviously, there'll be we do have that final report that we'll be reviewing and sending out to the task force shortly. And we will have to we'll have a future meetings to discuss the activities to satisfy the objectives of Act 54, SLH 2023. Otherwise, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 10:12 a.m. So thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.